Good Yantiv. Before I share a few words, I just want to let you know that I will be talking about October 7th in more detail than I have before. So if you have young children, you may want to send them to babysitting or to somewhere else. It's been such a difficult year. And in a few minutes, we're going to be saying Yizkor. We're going to remember also all those names. And we have them on our wall over here. 1,200 who were killed, the living hearts taken from us on October 7th. God, how could you let it happen? How could God let it happen? Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, was abducted on October 7th at the Supernova Festival. His parents, as many of us know his story, were from Chicago. In fact, his mother used to teach Judaics in the area at Oak Park Temple and sometimes here. We have members of our congregation who played mahjong with her and with other members of the family. But he grew up in Berkeley. He made Aliyah to Israel. They grew up in Jerusalem, and they were part of that American community in Jerusalem. Many of us, when we go to Israel, we encounter that community. I partly grew up in that community. Our previous principal, Marshall Kupchin, lives there. We've learned so much about Hirsch over this year. Hirsch was someone who they say just loved to learn as a child when he was growing up, would soak it all up, especially loved geography, and would say, this is where I want to visit when I'm older. So after the army, he started traveling. And he had a great sense of humor, from what everybody said. He had this dark, witty, very Israeli sense of humor. Made me think of the joke that they had in Israel over the summer as they were waiting for Iran to attack, and they would tell each other, I'll speak to you tomorrow morning if it's not World War III. And Hirsch has had this really strong sense of justice from what everybody said. He loved and pursued peace in his own sphere as best he could. He had this passion for soccer, and the team that he supported was not Beitar Jerusalem, but Hapoel Jerusalem, which is noted for promoting coexistence between the Jewish and Arab communities in Jerusalem. So the summer before last, Hirsch was traveling around Europe, going to all the music festivals and meeting people. He decided to come home for the holidays. And on the last night of the Chagim, of the holidays, he came back to be with his family in Jerusalem, and they had a lovely night. And they're shul goers, so they went to shul, and it was Simchat Torah, so they danced with the Torahs, and they rolled the Torahs back to the beginning, and then they had a lovely dinner. And then around 11 p.m., he told his parents, I'm going with my best friend, we're going to go have some fun. And he kissed his parents goodbye, and he gave a hug to the host, and his mother made a note that he hugged the host, because not all 23-year-olds would do that. And she didn't know exactly where he was going, but she knew he'd be gone overnight. He said he was camping somewhere. And he said, I'll see you tomorrow night. And then around 8 a.m. the next morning, she started to hear the bomb sirens. And even though she's a religious Jew, and so usually her phone is off, she decided to turn on her phone at 8:20 a.m. And there were two messages from Hirsch from 9 minutes earlier, 8:11. One that said, I love you, and one that said, I'm sorry. And despite her text back to him, she received nothing back. But she quickly found out what was happening because of all the live feeds, the live streaming from the festival, live streaming the massacre that was going on. So we know there were Hamas everywhere, and they were firing RPGs, rockets, machine guns, straight into all these young people who were there for a peace and unity festival. And Hirsch, witnesses say, ran to his car, but like so many, there were just more terrorists there. So he ran into a tiny bomb shelter. And in that bomb shelter, 8 feet by 5 feet, there were 29 other peace-loving, music-loving Israelis. So the terrorists started to throw grenades into the bomb shelter, and his best friend Aner started to throw them back. You have 4.5 seconds to throw a grenade back after it comes on you. He managed to throw 7 back before one exploded and killed him. And it's unclear exactly what happened after this, but Hirsch probably continued to throw some grenades out until they fired a rocket right into it. And almost everybody died, except for Hirsch and a few others who were slumped against the wall. His left arm was blown off. He was left-handed. And then the terrorists came in and ordered him and the 2 others to get up. And the videos show that he got up calmly, using his right hand, and followed them. We've lived with this story, with the other stories throughout this year, difficult year. And we put a smiling face on our posters, and we marched with them, we plastered them all over. We learned all these stories. And his mother, Rachel, was one of the most outspoken advocates of all the parents. She spoke to endless parents, and she spoke to world leaders. She had an audience with the Pope. She spoke at the conventions here in America. She did everything. She, like many of us, have taken on this custom, put on a sticker with a number of days since the hostages were taken. So living with these stories become the fabric of our year. For me, at least, a question that's so difficult: how do you find faith and hope after this happening to us in the way that it did, precisely when we need it the most? How do you find hope? And his story really brought to light for me that question more than any of the others, that question of God, how could you let this happen? How could this happen to us? Where are you? Story of Hirsch, just one of many stories, many much more disturbing than Hirsch's, of what happened that morning. In Israel, no longer safe, as we just heard, in peril, its existence at least suffered this huge blow, a wound that will take a generation to heal from, intractable military situation, perpetual warfare, anti-Israel sentiment permeating every single world body almost, so many countries. And here in America, our golden age, we were such a part of this country, Hollywood, Seinfeld, so everything that we were led in this country, we wrote the Christmas songs. Now in danger, cast away. All of our dreams, it feels like they come crashing down. And so we're back to being the old Jews, like in the Binding of Isaac, saying, Ad matai, until when, God, until when? Taking our children to be sacrificed. Until when, God? Just a small little snippet. But last November, my wife and I went downtown for dinner, and we brought posters of Hirsch and the others and started plastering them. And as I was putting them, I'm looking over my shoulders, worried a little bit for my safety. And I wonder how strange it is, how strange to have to worry to put up these posters. Ad matai, until when? The tolerance our society and world seems to have for Israel's destruction and for even celebrating October 7th and how that's made us feel. I've never heard so many families come up to me and say, Rabbi, what do you think about starting a day school in the area because the regular schools are just too anti-Semitic? So back in December, after she had an audience with the Pope, Rachel Goldberg was interviewed by a Catholic magazine, and they asked her, because they speak more about faith, right? How do you keep on going? How do you keep on going with everything that's been happening? And she said, well, part of it is just animalistic. It's like a mama bear and a baby bear. As we know, if you see a baby bear in the forest, don't try and face it down. Run as fast as you can. This animalistic need to save a life of your little one. And I also asked her more directly about her faith. She said, well, she continues to pray every day. Sometimes she screams at God and says, why are you making these children suffer? Why are you making us suffer? Then she said that she felt the fact that she was still praying meant that she was still in relationship. She was still in relationship. And then she spoke about how she found the Psalms to be very powerful for her through this period, because the Psalms express all of the feelings, all the powerful feelings. She said there's a psalm for when you're feeling hallelujah, praise the Lord, and when you're feeling where are you, what is happening. And she said that she sometimes puts up her hands up in the air when she's praying to God, and her children and her daughters go, there goes mom again praying to God. So as we know, unfortunately, Hirsch's story did not come to where we'd hoped and prayed for. We are going to include his name when we say the Yizkor in our hearts, at least because there's 1,200 names, along with those he was found with that day, Eden and Carmel and Alexander and Almog and Ori, just horrible. When that happened, it was just a moment, there was this communal outcry, what we call in our tradition a yalala, communal wail, as if our whole people suddenly were crying out, all of Am Yisrael, as I've never seen. And his death notice called him Yeled Shel Or, a child of light. And the funeral drew tens of thousands, and online many more, maybe there were 100,000. And then there was a Shiva tent outside their home for all those who wanted to come and comfort them during Shiva. And they say that the line outside the Shiva tent for Hirsch was an hour long just to be able to get there and say the one line you say in our tradition, may God comfort you among the remainder of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, because there are a lot of other mourners as well, the sick and everybody. I've never seen so many eulogies online and impromptu poems and outpourings. And there was one from a cousin of mine who's a rabbi, very active on social media, and he had just watched the funeral and been posting for days, and he suddenly posted a psalm that he wrote to Hirsch's mom, Rachel, after he heard her eulogy. In his poem, he said, he's a rabbi, he said, Rachel, you are my teacher, because I am furious at God, furious at God. And it wasn't even his son, and that's how he felt. How dare you? But she had thanked God. Hakarat hatov. She thanked God for the gift of giving her her son for the years that she had him. He was just wordless, didn't know what to do with it. And he was responding as so many of us, and among rabbis too, right? There are various opinions. Where is God in difficult times? What is the nature of God? How to tear our hearts so painfully? Why, God? What she said, he had no words for. And she finished her eulogy for her beloved son, said her goodbyes, and put the sticker on her shirt with the number of days left, because she wanted to fight for the remaining hostages, not her son, but for the others. And somehow she found her faith and her hope, not only in God, but her faith in life. How did she do it? We have the same question for Viktor Frankl, who I talked about a little bit on day 2 of Rosh Hashanah. He was in the camps at Auschwitz, and he wrote about how we all have the ability to choose how we respond to a situation. And his philosophy was, well, you can hold on to a purpose. He found that he had the choice to think about his wife, and that gave him a sense of meaning and purpose and lifted him up. One day he saw a bird land next to him, and somehow, as he was thinking about his wife, it brought to spirit his wife and gave him an incredible feeling of peace. How can you argue with someone who's able to make that decision and thought that you can always choose how you relate to life, and he's in the middle of the concentration camps? And he created this powerful philosophy that's been read by tens of millions, and he found strength. At the end of his life, they found in his diary and that he had his prayer book. And every day he said his Jewish prayers and he said Psalms, just like Rachel Goldberg. He didn't always talk about it. In fact, he talked a lot about big philosophical ideas, but he rarely talked about what he did. It was private. It was really just private. They found at the end of his life, every day he'd memorized some of this and said this, and it was just there between him and the universe, between him and God. And that it was part of what helped him find his faith and his ability to get through all of that, a living faith. Really, my thought whenever I read that book is that he almost appears superhuman, to be able to be in that moment and look at what's happening and have that detachment and philosophize. It made him superhuman. As it did with President Abraham Lincoln. And there are stories of him in really the darkest moments we know of Lincoln's presidency during the war, the Civil War, the darkest moments when the Union was losing all the battles to the Confederacy. And everyone was really questioning him, this young president, inexperienced, he said, not savvy enough to run a war. Why is he losing? So many troops are dying. And once again, they faced a battle that they could not lose. And he felt this personal despair. What am I going to do in this moment? And everyone around is a panic. It's not been going well. And so at that moment, they say he ran to his room, and he himself told everyone afterwards, and he said to God and he prayed, "We cannot go through another battle like this." And then in general, this whole period, he went through this journey of faith. And he wrote this beautiful letter on faith and God's providence that I encourage anyone who's interested in theology to read. One could really meditate on it for hours. One of Lincoln's profound realizations was, he said that one can be called to prayer because prayer gives strength and prayer gives resolution, resolve, solace. He says one can be called to prayer not just as individuals, but also as a nation, that a nation can come together in prayer. And my thought was, well, Lincoln should have called his Jewish friend and told him to bring a machzor, a high holiday prayer book, because he could have told him months ago, this is part of how we pray too. Right? Everything we do is in the plural. We are your flock, you are our shepherd, we are your people, you are our God. We believe that we could also come together as a people, and as a people in our togetherness, and sitting in a room together, and standing in a room together, and sitting in a room together, and standing in a room together, we can find some strength and faith and hope. And this is what we do on Yom Kippur. And President Lincoln believed that coming together would bring comfort and consolation to this people that he felt in charge of, not only as the political leader, but he felt a sense it was his duty to help bring a spirit of resolution and peace at the terrible, divisive times that he lived in. And as he wrote, he felt he wanted to bring this timeless spiritual ideal, faith in a higher power that oversees the universe and that will give him strength. He wanted to bring it to everybody else. And he wrote, he believed he was God's instrument. So there's a Lincoln scholar, Nathaniel Stevenson, who wrote, the sense that there really is a guiding hand that makes it possible, a genuine calling for both individuals and nations, gave him, Lincoln, a tremendous new sense of moral strength. It was not enough to watch events and to muddle along day by day. What was more important, Lincoln came to believe, was the effort to discern a pattern beneath the seeming irrationality of events. He had come to really believe that God molds history and he employs erring mortals to effect his purpose. You are the potter and we are the clay. Right? It's really the most difficult prayer for us moderns is that idea. We can only do what we each can to find our place within such an idea and such a powerful but difficult theology. And yet, the amazing part of the last year is how much the Jewish community has found its place within everything that's been happening, to find faith and life and God and everything. And this strange dichotomy, people are so worried that they're asking me, Rabbi, can you start a day school in Oak Park River Forest? Then, wow, people are asking me to start a day school in Oak Park River Forest, and their Jewish practices, they're still just, thinking about, should we light candles on Shabbat, but they want to send their kids to day school. People are finding hope in life and hope in the Jewish people. And since the beginning, these stories of heroism, so many of them on October 7th itself, but of the one grandmother who spoke Arabic and had just made cookies and spent this time charming the terrorists and giving them her cookies until the IDF came. And then half of Israel came to eat her cookies. And the Brother in Arms group, who were the leaders in the protest movement, who suddenly switched to being the biggest providers of supplies for the army because all the government was in disarray. And faith even in God. So when Rachel was being interviewed by that magazine, and they asked her, how do you have faith even now? And so she said everything I talked about earlier, and then she said, I want to quote this famous Jewish poem found in a cattle car going to Auschwitz. The last line, I believe in the sun even when it is not shining. I believe in God even when he is silent. So Yom Kippur was once the holiday when the high priests would go into the Holy of Holies that the ancients believed was where God dwelt. And in that encounter would then come out full of divine energy and power and say God's ineffable name to all the people. You can imagine the hundreds of thousands in the courtyard. And everyone would fall on their face and say out loud, Baruch Shem Kavod Machuto Leolam Va'ed. Blessed is the glory of his kingdom forever and ever. And their faith would be renewed. In our day, we spend all this time, the month before, trying to work on ourselves, doing the acts of tshuva, repentance. We have Rosh Hashanah, all that time we spend in this room, the 10 days of awe. Tshuva, also more literally return, just trying to think and be absorbed and do what we can. All the prayers and the chanting, as we try also ourselves to go into our hearts. When we do it together, as Lincoln imagined, and it was in that period that he created Thanksgiving, or instituted Thanksgiving, and there were other days of prayer that he instituted as he thought it would be a way to get the people together and to find new hope and strength. But then it's also solitary, go alone. We can only each one of us go alone into our own hearts and then bring it back to the collective. And find our way back to faith, whatever that means for each one of us. Faith that there may be just faith that there can be a new beginning. I believe in the sun, though it is not shining. Faith in ourselves, faith in our history, faith in our people, faith in our God. And then we know how it works. After time has passed, we really understand how exactly it all comes to be, but it becomes a holiday in our calendar. They tried to get us, but we survived. And then we encompass it into our story. And through that story, through teaching it, through commemorating it, we understand more of who we are. And our children and children's children and children's children's children understand more about who we are. And it brings meaning to their lives. And it reminds them to have faith in our story, and it will not come to an end. And as hard as it is to fold the dark chapters, there are also a lot of wonderful, positive chapters, amazing chapters. And sometimes our prayers are just individual, and sometimes they're like Rachel Goldberg. She got hundreds of thousands of all people of all faiths praying with her. However it is, what this day is finding a living faith and hope, however it takes shape. And that living faith does not have to mean a blind faith. I feel I have to talk about this. It's not a blind, false hope. And in Israel right now, there are also messianists in the government, and their only reaction to everything that's happened is we have to turn completely inward, not trust anybody who's not Jewish. This is the opportunity, they believe, to cast aside morals and ethics and to rid the land of all the enemies. And this summer I talked to an Israeli who was part of that world, and he said to me, after October 7th, what it taught us is we have to learn to become perfectly self-reliant. We can't depend on anybody else. We have to become a religious Sparta, like the Greek ancient kingdom that lived completely by the sword as warriors. He said, in my mind, cherry-picking all the sources in the Torah, we have to learn how to live with the Torah in one hand and the gun in the other. Have faith that God will back us. I said, well, God also gave us a brain, and God also gave us the most powerful nation in the world as a friend. And some of us were in Washington for the march in Israel back in November. One of the, for me at least, most powerful thoughts and rekindling my own faith is that this tiny little Jewish nation has the most powerful nation in the world as a friend. And that even as Israel has accomplished amazing feats, and the truth is it does have to learn how to be self-reliant as well and can't completely depend on anybody else, also relies on the friendship of this country. And God gave us a brain to help us discern and understand and process and go through everything we're going through. But perhaps the greatest lesson of this time period is that we have to also have an activated Jewish neshama, an activated Jewish soul. And that we're not here 3,500 years later because of our skills in Talmud, and we're not here 3,500 years later because of our cleverness, and we're not here 3,500 years ago because of all of that. We're here because of our faith in ourselves, our faith in what we stand for, that we never give up who we are despite whatever comes to us. And that even when these difficult episodes happen, they always strain our belief in our mission, but they then strengthen our belief in our mission. We're not charged to be a kingdom of warriors on Mount Sinai. We were charged to be a kingdom of priests. Right? There were those who walked into the gas chambers as unbelievers, and there was those who walked in the gas chambers singing, Ani Ma'amin, I believe in the coming of the Messiah. But however we want to talk about it, it's when we're in the space of that soulfulness that we feel that we're not alone, and we're with all the souls of the Jewish people. So when I was traveling all summer long, when going from France and all around France and Amsterdam, and whenever I saw a Jewish person, I just felt like running up to them and hugging them and saying, Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people lives. And in a moment, feeling, just seeing them, that somehow standing with us was not just us, but somehow all the Jewish people were there in that moment with us, holding us. All the prophets and prophetesses and all the patriarchs and matriarchs and the rabbis and just everyday men and women and the 6 million and the 1,200 from October 7th. And finding that faith does not mean we leave it all up in the air and say, we don't have to do anything, it's all going to be okay. But it means finding something to give us new power, new strength, new vision amidst what's happening. And finally, I want to end with another president of this nation of ours, President George Washington. In an episode, the scholars dispute exactly the veracity of it, but also his darkest moment of Valley Forge. And in the middle of winter, and his troops, some of them don't even have shoes on their feet, barely any food, and the British are rallying and massing huge numbers. And he too turned in prayer. And they say that in the prayer that he turned upwards that day, he received a vision. And in that vision, he found strength, and he found ideas, he found inspiration that carried him not only into the battles ahead and the idea in that moment to approach the French for help, but also to guide the nation all the years afterwards. So the tide turned. but his heart and mind were receptive. So for us too, we have to decide how we can make our hearts and minds receptive for that vision. And this nation needs it too, we all know. For the Jewish people, as Yossi Klein Halevi, the commentator, said, how can we make ourselves right to move forward? And for me at least, what does that mean for the future of our people? And that question, a Judaism where morals and ethics are at the center, a Judaism that teaches that we are all made equal, and that despite all the hate coming our way, is not closed to the world, but open to the world. And the works that connects its youth to our positive story and mission. And to really, we need to find that faith in each other, that we are a nation, the Jewish people. And we've been through difficult times, but we'll keep on going. We're more proud now than we've been for a long time, despite it all, because we found how much strength we have. And that we're once again, as a high priest, the Kohen Gadol, walking into the Holy of Holies, not knowing if we will find, but seeking that living faith. With our hands up in the air, as Rachel Goldberg, saying, why do you make us suffer, God? Why do you make us suffer, but still walking in, not knowing how we will emerge? But confident that whatever we find, we will become transformed. So today we remember Hirsch. We remember Hirsch and all the other hostages that are still there and those that passed away. We remember the 1,200 souls. We weep at their sacrifice. It's the first time that many of us are experiencing what Jewish martyrdom is like. We try to find a new beginning. We try to find a new vision. We try and find that living faith, the living faith of Hirsch's mother, Rachel, the living faith of Lincoln, of Washington, to inspire us. And we hold on to our calling as a nation, and we ask ourselves, how will we respond? How will we respond? Good Yontif.